Welcome everybody. Rob Arlett here, sitting down with a young man by the name of Chief Bill Brierley. And Chief, thank you for having me in your home today.
You're quite welcome.
And why don't you share a little bit about your background, if you would, why I'm here today, and what we're going to share and what we're going to talk about.
Well, my background is nothing to brag about. I was born and raised in Newark, went to Newark High School. The day I graduated, I went in the Marine Corps and spent the next 3 years overseas, most of it in Korea and the Far East. I came back from there. I worked a couple months at the Chrysler plant in Newark, building military tanks, and realized that wasn't my calling. So I then went on the police force there in Newark. Shortly after going on, I was selected to go to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, which I graduated from. I then was lucky in that my career kind of took off. I went through the ranks very quickly, and I was promoted to chief of police in 1970. Most of my time on the force before that was either as a patrolman or a detective. I became very active in national and international law enforcement and served on many functional committees. About 3 years after making chief, I founded the Delaware Police Chiefs Association and also the Delaware Police Chiefs Foundation. I founded both those organizations. I was the chairman of the Delaware Chiefs for the first 9 years. And then as I moved on to other things, I was fortunate in that by getting active in the international chiefs, I had a lot of travel and did a lot of things there, and some I like to remember, some I like to forget. But nonetheless, most of my life has been there. I retired in 1989 from Newark, and I went to work for the international chiefs on body armor.
Okay.
And I spent 16 years between the international chiefs and the DuPont company in the testing and development of the bulletproof vest. I worked in a ballistics lab. Was a very few people there, and that's where I lost some of my hearing because we had to fire so many rounds at testing Kevlar.
Right.
But that was a very rewarding thing because up until right now, with that vest that we developed, we've saved 3,500 police officers. If we look at the officers that died in the last 30 years by felonious gunfire, 42% of them would be alive today if they had a vest. The bullet hit the chest, and it's a bullet that the vest would have stopped. So I went around all the police academies all over the country with lectures, trying to convince officers that it was better to sweat than bleed. So it was a promotional thing, and I say so far we've saved over 3,500.
Wow.
And that's not all ballistics, it's mostly all gunfire, but there's also car crashes and other things that a surgeon would certify that the officer would have died had it not been for the vest. And dealt with a lot of widows and orphan children, and it was kind of an emotional thing because a lot of times I had to interview the widows after the officer was killed, how often he wore it, and trying to get a handle of what the real threat was on the street and what we could do to neutralize it. So it was a very, very rewarding thing. It was life-saving. And,
in a very big way, and just so our friends know that we're sitting down also here with Sam Chick, a community watchdog of sorts here in Delaware, and so he's joining the conversation with Chief Brierley. So Chief, you've had an amazing career in law enforcement. No, you've had a stellar, you are a true leader of our community. I think of our state for the association that you founded. and also I think for the work that you did nationally saving the men and women in blue. I have to tell you, I don't think I knew that part about you, so thank you for sharing. Thank you for
feels
sharing
very good, but that and $1.50 is worth a cup of coffee.
Well, on that note, thank you for the coffee as we sit here in your beautiful home. But we're here, as you know, for a reason, because I know we've had conversations over the phone a few different times. And I've had conversations with different people, certainly over the years, especially while you were at the Newark Police Department as their chief. Here in Delaware, there were certainly a lot of rumors or chit-chatter, if you would, about Vice President Biden, back then, regular Joe Biden, being arrested. Is that a true statement? Has Joe Biden been arrested?
Absolutely.
Talk to us about that, if you would.
Well, I told you I'm at that point in my life right now where my age and IQ are the same number. So my memory of everything I have to qualify isn't exact and precise. But what I do remember is absolute. You know, I'm not going to stretch it. I'm not going to embellish it. And as I indicated to you, I don't necessarily have a dog in this fight. But it's kind of common knowledge by a number of law enforcement people of what occurred. So I don't mind walking you through that. I forget the exact year. I know Joe was a senior. He was in Harder Hall.
Senior at the University of Delaware.
Yes,
okay.
He was in Harder Hall at the University of Delaware and lived on campus. He actually lived in North Star. His father was a car salesman in Newark, Porter Motors. I was a detective at the time. I got a call from the Pennsylvania State Police that there had been a larceny in a number of the towns in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and they were able to get the tag number of the car of the three guys that were stealing signs. It was kind of provocative in that they wanted the signs that were rather unique. Intercourse, bird in hand, lidditz, paradise, all those exotic names that you'll find up
town
there.
Names in Pennsylvania.
Yes, and all those occurred in Pennsylvania. And I say, the initial thing started with the Pennsylvania State Police calling me, because I was Newark's only detective for a number of years. So I responded to it. I got the tag number, ran it, and found out it was a college student at the University of Delaware.
Chief, if I can, because I remember you shared with me prior, beyond the signs that he stole, what other crime did he commit?
Well, the people that reported the larcenies and got the tag number, at the same time, the thing that made it more serious than just a petty larceny or a grand larceny of signs was the fact that they stole a traffic light out of the intersection and a stop sign. Now that made it a little more serious, and that someone could very easily have been killed because that traffic light had been removed. I went to the university campus. The three guys, that was Biden, and I don't remember the names of the other two fellas. Say, memory's a little old there, but I caught them with the signs. They had the signs, so they couldn't deny it. Now, by law, when you're enforcing the law, the presumption is that if you're in possession of recently stolen goods, you're presumed to be the thief. So I had enough probable cause to make the arrest. I had them and I had the evidence, the stolen signs. And there wasn't a if or a maybe when it said intercourse. That sign didn't come from any place else except Lancaster County.
Right.
So all this crime happened in Lancaster County. I was able to recover the signs. I took all three of them into custody, took them to the police department. I placed them under arrest. They were all arrested. I fingerprinted and photographed them. And that's been a kind of an interesting story in a way. At that time, we didn't have the technology we have today in law enforcement, and the mug shots at that time were Polaroid. So there was only the one Polaroid shot.
Right.
When I fingerprinted them 3 times each. Well, one card to stay in Newark police files, one to the State Bureau of Identification, which is run by the Delaware State Police, and one to the FBI. Now, the card that went to the FBI was an actual FBI card. They supplied them to local law enforcement, the fingerprint card. We did not have the National Crime Information Center online at that time. It was just the Federal Bureau of Investigation Identification Division. So all 3 of those went out. I got into the case of interviewing them, and I remember how they were begging for sympathy over the fact that Joe was very clear that, you know, I'm a senior, I'm about to graduate, my dad sent me here and he's going to kill me when he finds out. So, as I say, realizing at the time that I only had, you know, college students with nothing beyond, and it wasn't a prank, it was a crime. One thing I'd like to make very, very clear, when you're a student at a university or a high school, a dean of students or a principal in a high school enforces the rules of that school or university. If it's a violation of a crime, a law, that's only returnable to a court of competent jurisdiction.
Right.
That's one of the biggest problems we have even today, is colleges take felonies to student court. It's one side of the law on this side of the street and something for somebody else. Where a citizen gets arrested, the college, we actually had in my time, and I don't mind saying it on the record, we had the university dean of student try rape cases. And that's how disgusting it was. And in fact, in those days, it was so primitive that when we had a co-ed rape, we'd take her to the hospital to certify she had been raped, and she had to pay for the test.
Oh my.
That's how anarchic it was. So at any rate, I booked them. I released them on their own recognizance and called the Pennsylvania State Police to tell them I had them in custody. What the Pennsylvania State Police wanted to know the most, did I recover the traffic light and the stop sign, because they were concerned about the safety of Pennsylvania citizens. And I said no, I couldn't get them to confess to it. And in the final analysis, we did not recover that stop sign and light. I think that the way we handled it, they knew the seriousness of that, and they wouldn't cop out and confess. I tried my darndest to recover that, appeal to their sense of fair play and fundamental fairness, but they didn't respond to it. They knew that made it much more serious. So at any rate, I released them on their own recognizance. I notified the Attorney General's office. I didn't arraign them before court. I then talked to the Pennsylvania State Police, and they said that not counting the traffic light and the stop sign, the signs that were stolen were worth $1,250. Well, what's the significance of that? It's the significance of being a misdemeanor or a felony. At that time, a felony was the larceny of anything over $500. Today, to make it a felony is $1,000. The laws changed in 1968 when they recodified the entire, criminal code. I also, and I don't remember if I actually filled the paperwork, I know I put it in my report, I also arrested them as a fugitive from the state of Pennsylvania. Now, the significance of that, and why I bring that up, is that the Pennsylvania State Police needed to establish it was either a misdemeanor or a felony, because if they wanted to extradite them, they wouldn't extradite for a misdemeanor. They would only extradite for a felony. So that's where the $1,250. And the Pennsylvania detective that I worked with is the one that gave me that figure. So as I noodled the thing, and I then, by the way, as a courtesy, I didn't have to, but as a courtesy, I called the dean of students because I made the arrest on campus. So it was only a courtesy. It wasn't something I had to do. So he made it crystal clear, as far as he was concerned, all three of them were suspended as students. So the next day, I kind of noodled this and thought, is there an alternative to this problem? And here's three kids that their life's, you know what it comes down to, and I don't want to, muddy the waters here, but it came down to a very simple saying that I've had all my life. You don't know what you can do until you try to undo what you've already done. And I thought that was a simple approach to it, that they had regrets on it, and there might be a better way to solve the problem. We recovered the stolen property, so we weren't looking for a pound of flesh. So what I did, I called the captain. I remember his name was Captain Peacock. He was the troop commander of the Pennsylvania State Police Barracks in Lancaster. And at that time, he said if we wanted to handle it the way I was suggesting, he could go for it. So what we suggested, that we would retire the charges if we would give them 5 hours to return all the stolen goods and put them back in place, put all the signs back. They had a 5-hour deadline, and man, they took off at high port, believe me. So I didn't have that lawful authority to drop an arrest that I had already made, so I contacted the Attorney General, and I don't know who was Attorney General then.
In Delaware?
In Delaware,
okay.
Yes. And they said that that was okay. If you get down to it even today, only 2% of felonies go to trial. Everything's plea bargain. Plea bargain, plea bargain. 98% of all felony arrests today are plea bargain. So it wasn't like we were doing something that wasn't, usual. By and large, I wrote criminal reports, submitted the fingerprint cards, did everything that I should do, and then it became later on, everybody knew that I made the arrest. I mean, at roll call, it was announced that, it was just the way we did things then, but it had no real significance at the time, because I say Joe was just a student. It pains me to have to even, talk about this, but, it's facts. And if anybody wants to say it didn't happen, I'm here to tell you it did happen. A crime was committed, and those three guys committed it. I'm not trying to make it sound worse than it is, but it certainly is now under review, because his judgment was, out of line, and he now became a significant person where you have to report. Any job you have to report, have you ever been arrested? He's never done that. He's never reported that. Suddenly, the other thing that makes it very concerning to me is all the records have disappeared. How the hell did that happen? There's only 2 ways to remove a criminal arrest. One is a pardon by the governor, which pardons the offense, but the record stands. The other is an expungement issued by Superior Court. They serve an order on the chief of police of that jurisdiction. I wasn't chief then. Order them to destroy any report or any notation of that arrest. I don't know if that was ever done. But not only did Newark's records suddenly disappear, but suddenly there's no record of the state police and no record of the FBI. And that kind of concerns me, how that happened. Now let me just tell you, when I was chief, I instituted a policy where when the court sent me an order to destroy a criminal record. I complied with that order and destroyed the record of that arrest, but what I did, I put the order that ordered me to do it where the fingerprint card would have been, because the order didn't require me to destroy the order. So maybe it was game plan, but I wanted to be at least justify why there was a hole in my records.
Right.
Did somebody play games or somebody do a favor? I'm not going to live that way. So that was my policy at the time. Over the years, it's kind of been juicy in that a lot of people have asked me about it. It was very common knowledge by a great number of people. Once he became important as a senator and the vice president and everything, people wanted to know, is this representative of his value system or whatever? So I want it crystal clear that I'm telling this story and responding, not looking, for any reward or any retribution. I'm simply responding to something that's been asked of me. I didn't set this in motion. It's common knowledge, and because of some of the other stuff going on in this political campaign, people want to know more. And as far as I know, I didn't, initiate this, but I'm certainly responding to it. And I can only tell you that everything I'm telling you is true. Over the 50 years that I knew Joe Biden, I had a very working relationship with him. I've responded in sending a testimonial dinner in his name, where every police department in Delaware was there. We gave him over 20 awards. We had a who's who on the dais, luminaries from Washington and every place. We had an honor guard, with all the pomp and the ceremony, to say thanks to our state senator for helping law enforcement in troubling times. Mm-hmm. Since then, I'm just dismayed that he has pulled a reversal and now is against defunding police departments. And I don't mind telling you, that upsets me. Right now...
He's not against defunding. He supports the defunding.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. He's gone on record that he supports defunding in some instances, right. Police departments. And right now, I think every police department in the country has endorsed his adversary and give him no support whatsoever, where before he had it and threw it away. Right now in law enforcement, if Joe wants to get his reputation back, he'll have to reach in the toilet. Just that simple. One thing kind of amazes me about Joe, and I say, friends don't turn on friends. Friends don't do something to a friend that the friend wouldn't do to you. You try to keep that kind of working relationship. But with Joe is, right now in my judgment, not the man that he used to be. His value systems have gone out. I hear the word that he's been hijacked. I don't know. But the one thing that kind of amuses me, that when Joe talks tough, Joe has all the courage and ferocity of a koala bear or a lop-eared rabbit, as far as I'm concerned. And all his talking tough is just that, it's just talk. That's not Joe Biden.
So, Chief, let me ask you. You arrested Joe Biden.
Absolutely.
You handcuffed him.
Absolutely.
You took the mug shots.
Yes.
And then you filed the police report. So, based on the gravity of the offense, correct me if I'm wrong, but based on the level of the crime that he committed as a senior at the University of Delaware, correct me, but if he was prosecuted, right, to the fullest of the extent of the law, based on the charges that you brought forward,
yes,
he would have not been able to vote.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Absolutely.
He would have not been able to be an attorney.
Absolutely.
He was kicked out of the University of Delaware,
Yes,
and he would have never been able to hold public office.
absolutely. That's the consequence of being convicted of a felony.
So I want everybody to understand what Chief just said. I think what America is seeing today, with all the laptop, the emails, the apparent crimes that might have been committed, we'll see. Let the investigation play out. But it all started with you. It all started with his actions at the University of Delaware, right? When he was a senior. That's when it started. All of this inability to be held accountable, right? He's never been held accountable. Would you agree with that?
No, there was no consequences. There was no consequences. And that always bothered me. I policed that campus for 32 years. And over the years, it sickens me, and still does, that the university handles things that they know is wrong. As I say, criminal arrests are answerable to a court of competent jurisdiction. And when you start thinking you have the authority to hear felonies in the dean of students' office, you know, while you're locking up a kid for stealing the tube of lipstick over on the other side, that sickens me as a law enforcement officer. You know, you just can't do that. What the Supreme Court has ruled time and time again, that what a cop does with a badge and a gun is under color of law. So you have to obey the rules. There's 41,000 laws on the books. Jesus Christ, you could give me the Army, Navy, and the Air Force, and I couldn't enforce the Ten Commandments. And if I could, you wouldn't. We need those 41,000 laws. And I'm not a religious person. You know, I'm not an atheist either. But the point is when you put it in perspective, there ought to be a consequence to committing a felony. Certainly there should. But at the time, I was simply doing what they're doing right now, full speed ahead, is alternatives to arrest. All the legislation at the federal and the state and local levels is the only reason crime's down right now is the right people are locked up. That's a fact.
Right.
That's a fact. But when only 2% of felony arrests, go to plea bargain, something's wrong. The only way to have the rules be the rules is to enforce them. And I'm not looking for hanging people. In this thing, I think I acted responsibly. I tried to be fair-minded, and I tried to do the right thing. But does it bother me now that he has other things pending that questions his veracity? Yes, it does bother me, and that's why it bothers me of what I did. And I do research in my own mind, did I do the right thing? Should I have handled it differently? Because as you indicate, the consequences that if I had convicted him of a felony, his life he'd still be Joe Biden.
So you don't have to answer the question, but knowing how Joe Biden has evolved over the 50 years, right, since the time at University of Delaware to being a U.S. Senator for 40 plus years, to being Vice President for 8 years, now we are 8 days away from a presidential election. Whereas you've got Joe Biden at the top of the ticket for the Democrat Party. And by the way, are you a registered Republican?
No, sir. I'm an independent, have been all my life.
Thank you. So, and you've seen Joe. You've known Joe for 50 years. Knowing where he has become, how he has evolved into wanting to defund the police departments around the country, do you regret your decision to let him off the hook as a senior at the University of Delaware?
Going back to my favorite old saying, you can't unring a bell.
Right.
And if I could undo what I did, I'd handle it differently.
Yeah.
I would handle it differently. There's much more at stake. There was nothing at stake at the time except, his reputation and his future employment opportunities stuff. But right now, what's at stake is the sovereignty of this nation. And that becomes reason enough to speak out. I have serious question, and probably one of the most important things that has caused me to rethink this, and I throw it in as a caveat that is absolute. When Joe ran against Obama for president of the United States, Joe's son, who they have walking on water now, and I don't like to talk about the departed, but Joe's son was Attorney General of the state of Delaware. Joe was running for president, and
Just to clarify, Chief, his son, Bo Biden.
Bo Biden.
Bo Biden,
yes,
just to
Bo
clarify.
Biden.
Okay.
And Bo Biden at the time was Attorney General. And he sent an employee of his, a retired guy who was a very good friend of mine, and he asked me if I would not speak about this arrest because he was afraid it would hurt Joe's candidacy against Obama.
So, Bo Biden, the then candidate for president of the United States back in 2008,
Yes.
that would have been the year, sent one of his staff, one of his employees,
Yes.
to this very home. This home that we're sitting in right now, or was it a previous home?
Right here.
Right here in this home, sent a staff member to your home here and asked you to do what?
To not speak anything about having arrested Joe in earlier years. And that bothered me tremendously. I had no reason to, go on a crusade. I had nothing against Joe, and there was no reason to, resurrect it. But now it becomes important because he's going for the highest office in the land, and if his value system is now what it, was then, I would have handled it differently.
Yeah.
But it bothers me. It bothers me. I can't undo it.
Well, Chief, I got to tell you, it's pretty compelling, incredible. I mean, you were the arresting officer of Joe Biden, and because you had a heart of sorts, and had a heart of sympathy for a young man as a senior, he got off, and then here we are. Here we are 50 years later, whereas now he's running for the highest office of the land. And America does not know that Joe Biden was arrested. The American people don't know this.
The interesting thing there is, I told you I went to the Attorney General. I also went to the Dean of Students and told him what the Pennsylvania State Police and I agreed on the plan, that we would retire the charges if they put all the signs back and so forth. It was interesting that there he was being expelled from the university for his behavior, and today he's on their payroll.
Yeah, go figure. And actually, they have the at the University of Delaware, they have the
all his
center,
papers are there from the Senate.
and they're under lock and key. Wonder why? Why do you think that is?
Well, why is he locked in his basement?
Well, I think all of America would like to know that very question, Chief. So, but to your point, I think in the end, Joe Biden just has not been held accountable. I think, nor his family, apparently.
Yeah.
So,
in this interview too,
yeah,
I wanted to do it at the beginning, but I'd like to, work it in there in the fact that when I put this in perspective, and is it of any value right now, I know that I'm putting myself at risk. I know that they're going to slice and dice me. They're going to shoot the messenger. I don't know, based on what I see in the swamp in Washington, what retaliation will come against me, but it's worth on because it's the truth. It's the absolute truth. There's no other ways to spin it, and that's it. Joe plays loose with the truth. He just does. You don't want to.
Has he always, Chief? You've known him 50 years. Has he always?
You notice I didn't call him a liar. I just said he plays loose with the truth, which has called him a liar.
Well, I appreciate your time.
Well, I'm more than willing to do it, as I said, because there's so much at stake right now, and I'm like everybody else. The anticipation and I'm not going to be around much longer. With my age, and I'm 86 right now, and I have to also qualify, since I'm being interviewed, is that I will be the first to admit, because they say they're going to turn on me and say this isn't wrong, or you don't remember. I don't remember the two guys with him. He does. And I've run into them since, and they approached me and laughed about what happened. In fact, what the guy approached me and said, he said, "You arrested us back in such and such a year, and now you look younger than we do." And he was joking about it.
Yeah.
But at the time, as I say it was just doing what.
So if somebody were to ask Joe Biden today, 8 days out from a campaign, from an election, if somebody were to ask Joe Biden today if he was arrested, what do you think he would say?
Deny it.
He would deny it.
Yeah, just like he denies fracking.
Well, yet you're sitting right here as a personal testimony of the person who actually did the arrest.
Well, not only while he's running for president, Joe's always in Delaware had a reputation of playing loose with the truth. I mean, he just has.
Yeah.
And, I can tell you that the guy that I worked with and sort of utilizing Joe with a testimonial dinner, and I had him, I had the entire IACP at Wilmington at the Radisson Hotel when I was president of the National Chiefs. Barry Goldwater was the speaker, and Joe was there, Ed Meese was there, and so forth. It's kind of interesting that, I don't know, Joe just gets away with something nobody else can get away with. I don't know how else to put it. But he's lived a charmed life that way. And right now, if a fraction of that stuff about the laptop is true, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Well, being a person of law enforcement and knowing Joe Biden for 50 years, and you don't have to answer my question, but do you plan on voting for Joe Biden on November 3rd?
Joe, we've been good to Joe. Law enforcement's been good to him,
Right.
and he hasn't been good back.
So I guess you just...
There was a time when he was.
Yeah,
He was a cheerleader for law enforcement.
but no longer.
But I'm telling you right now, what this all comes down to, it's making me look like a switch hitter. I was his friend now. I'm telling something that he would rather I not tell. But you just can't argue with selling your soul by lying about it. The truth is the truth.
Yeah. Well, Chief, I appreciate any final thoughts? Any final thoughts?
No, I guess we're dealing with the unknown.
Yeah.
That causes me a little bit of concern of where does it go from here. But I have no. I'm not going to be involved in it as far as decisions that are made. And
Sure.
the American people will make that decision of what it does to his value system.
Right.
I just think that when I put it all in perspective right now, for the first time, he's standing trial. He's on trial.
Those are pretty powerful parting words, I would say.
It caught up to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not because of that incident then. It's a conglomeration of all the things and all the do's and don'ts, all the times that he's stretched the truth or, double clutched. I just don't have time for that.
Yeah. Well, Chief, I want to thank you.
You're quite welcome.